The Vectar warships arrived at dawn. They always arrived at dawn. Commander Zalmoth believed that morning light made the blood look brighter on camera. The trading colony of New Perth never had a chance. 300 families lived there, mostly farmers and merchants who sold grain to passing ships. They had no military, no weapons larger than hunting rifles. When the Vectar fleet appeared in their sky like a cluster of dark stars, the colonists sent a simple message: "We surrender. Please don't hurt us." Zalmoth read the message and smiled. His face was covered in gray scales, and his eyes were solid black like pools of oil. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the planet through the viewing screen. His claws tapped against the metal railing. "Prepare the demonstration," he said. His crew moved quickly. They had done this 47 times before. 47 worlds, 47 surrenders. The Vectar Empire had perfected the art of conquest through fear. They didn't need to fight long wars. They didn't need to waste soldiers. They just needed to show what happened to those who resisted. And then everyone else would give up. The landing craft descended to New Perth's main square. Vectar soldiers, each one 8 feet tall and covered in armor that looked like black ice, surrounded the town center. They grabbed people at random: a baker, a teacher, a teenager. They forced them to their knees in front of cameras. Zalmoth descended from his ship personally. He always did for the first demonstration. He walked slowly between the kneeling prisoners, his boots clicking on the stone square. The colonists were crying. Some were praying. One woman was begging to see her children one last time. "Broadcast this to every planet in this sector," Zalmoth said. "Let them all see." The execution was efficient and brutal. Zalmoth didn't enjoy cruelty for its own sake. He simply understood that fear required a certain level of horror. The broadcasts went out across 40 systems. Millions of people watched. And when it was over, Zalmoth stood before the cameras, his uniform spattered with red. "This is what resistance costs," he said. "Surrender immediately. Or we will visit every world in your territory. We will do this to your children. We will do this to your elderly. We will do this until you have no one left to mourn." Within 6 hours, New Perth's government surrendered completely. Within 2 days, 3 neighboring colonies also surrendered. They dismantled their defense stations. They opened their borders. They begged for mercy. Zalmoth didn't give them mercy. He gave them terms, harsh terms, but he gave them their lives. That was enough. This was the Vectar way. This was why their empire had grown so quickly. Why waste time on sieges and battles when you could simply terrify your enemy into submission? Fear was the universe's most efficient weapon. Fear is universal. Zalmoth often told his officers, "Every species understands pain. Every species wants to live. Show them death, and they will give you everything to avoid it." For 12 years, this strategy had never failed. Then the Vectar scouts found the human colonies. The first report came from the frontier, far from the Empire's core worlds. A Vectar patrol ship had detected human settlements on 17 planets in the outer band. The humans called their main colony Harmony's Edge. According to the scans, it was home to nearly 2 million people. Zalmoth studied the reports with interest. The humans were new to this region of space. They had only been here for about 50 years. Their technology was decent, but not exceptional. Their military fleet was small. They seemed to focus more on trade and farming than warfare. "Another easy conquest," one of his lieutenants said. Zalmoth nodded slowly. "Begin the operation. Standard procedure. Find an isolated target. Make the demonstration. Wait for the surrender." The Vectar fleet found their target 3 weeks later. A small human cargo station orbited a gas giant. Only 15 people worked there, managing fuel shipments for passing vessels. The station was called Waypoint 7. It was perfect. The Vectar ships surrounded the station before the humans could even send a distress signal. Soldiers boarded through the docking ports. The humans inside didn't fight. They put their hands up immediately. Most of them looked terrified. But one of them, a cargo pilot named Jinho, just looked tired. Jinho was 34 years old. He had dark hair that was starting to gray at the temples, and a scar across his left eyebrow from an accident years ago. He wore a simple blue jumpsuit with oil stains on the sleeves. When the Vectar soldiers grabbed him, he didn't struggle. He just sighed like a man who had been interrupted during boring work. "Am I going to die?" he asked one of the soldiers. The soldier didn't answer. They never answered. The Vectar took 5 prisoners from Waypoint 7. They killed the other 10 immediately, just to make a point. Then they loaded the survivors onto the flagship. Zalmoth walked through the holding cells, examining each prisoner. Most of them were shaking. One woman was crying so hard, she couldn't breathe. But Jinho sat calmly on his bench, looking at the walls. "This one," Zalmoth said, pointing at Jinho. His officers nodded. They began preparing the broadcast equipment. The demonstration would be shown to every human colony simultaneously. They would send the message to Earth itself. The Vectar had researched human communication networks. They knew how to reach everyone at once. Jinho was moved to a special chamber. It was a large room with white walls and bright lights. In the center was a metal chair with restraints. Cameras surrounded it from every angle. This room had been designed specifically for broadcasts. Every detail was meant to be seen clearly. Zalmoth entered the room and stood before Jinho. The human was strapped to the chair now, unable to move. But he wasn't crying. He wasn't begging. He was just looking at Zalmoth with a strange expression. "Do you know what's about to happen to you?" Zalmoth asked. "I can guess," Jinho said. "We are going to broadcast your death to your entire species. They will watch you suffer. They will hear you scream. And then they will understand that resistance is pointless." Jinho was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You've done this before?" 47 times. 47 species. All of them surrendered. "Interesting," Jinho said. He almost sounded like he was thinking about something else. Like he was doing math in his head. Zalmoth felt a slight irritation. This human should be terrified. They all were at this point. But Jinho just looked, distracted. "Do you have any last words for your people?" Zalmoth asked. Sometimes the prisoners said goodbye to their families. Those moments were particularly effective on camera. Jinho thought about it. Then he smiled. It was a small smile. Just a slight curve of his lips. But there was something wrong about it. Something that made Zalmoth's skin crawl beneath his scales. "Yeah," Jinho said. "I have something to say." Zalmoth gestured to his crew. The cameras activated. Red lights blinked on. The broadcast began transmitting across human space. Jinho looked directly into the nearest camera. And his smile grew wider. The broadcast reached Earth first. Then Mars. Then the lunar colonies. Within seconds, it jumped through relay stations to every human settlement across 50 light-years. 2 billion people received the transmission simultaneously. They saw Jinho strapped to the chair. They saw the Vectar commander standing beside him. They saw the torture devices being prepared in the background. And they saw Jinho smiling. Zalmoth began his speech. He had given this speech 47 times. He knew exactly how to modulate his voice for maximum effect. Deep and threatening. Slow and deliberate. Every word designed to create dread. "Humans of Earth and her colonies," he said. "I am Commander Zalmoth of the Vectar Empire. Your space now belongs to us. Your worlds are ours to claim. You have one choice. Surrender completely, or watch your people die one by one." He gestured to Jinho. "This is your first lesson. This man will suffer. You will hear his screams. You will see his blood. And when he finally dies, you will understand that resistance is futile." Zalmoth nodded to his technician. The torture began. It should have been simple. The devices were designed to cause maximum pain with minimum lethality. The goal was to keep the prisoner alive and conscious for as long as possible. Zalmoth had seen hundreds of aliens break within the first 30 seconds. But Jinho didn't scream. The first shock hit him. Electricity coursed through his body. His muscles tensed. His teeth clenched. But instead of screaming, he laughed. It was a short laugh. Almost a chuckle. Like someone had told him a joke he hadn't expected. Zalmoth frowned. Increase the intensity. Zalmoth. Increase the intensity. The second shock was stronger. Jinho's body convulsed. His hands gripped the armrests so hard, his knuckles turned white. But when it ended, he was still smiling. And the smile was bigger now. You think this is funny? Zalmoth said. No, Jinho said. His voice was strained but steady. I think it's ironic. What is ironic? You really don't know what you've just done, do you? Zalmoth felt something he hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty. This wasn't following the pattern. The prisoner should be begging by now. He should be crying. He should be broken. But Jinho looked almost eager. Perhaps you need more convincing, Zalmoth said. He activated the next device. This one used focused heat. It would burn without killing. Slow and agonizing. Jinho gasped when it hit him. His body arched against the restraints. But still, no scream, just a long, shaking breath. And when he exhaled, he was laughing again. Stop laughing, Zalmoth shouted. Can't help it, Jinho said through gasps. You have no idea what's coming. I know exactly what's coming. Your death. Not mine, Jinho said. He looked directly at Zalmoth now. The smile had changed. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't brave defiance. It was something worse. It was pity. Yours. Zalmoth felt his claws dig into his palms. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. He had conducted 47 demonstrations. He had broken thousands of prisoners. None of them had ever looked at him with pity. He tried everything. Every device. Every technique. Every method. Designed to shatter the will of any living creature. Jinho's body suffered. His skin burned. His nerves screamed, but his voice never screamed with them. And that smile never left his face. After 2 hours, Zalmoth ended the broadcast. Not because Jinho had died. He hadn't. He was still alive. Still conscious. Still smiling. Zalmoth ended it because he couldn't stand to continue. Something had gone terribly wrong. Across human space, people watched the broadcast in silence. In homes, in bars, in military command centers, in schools that had evacuated the children but where the adults remained. They watched Jinho smile. On Mars, a woman named Hana watched from a medical station. She was Jinho's sister. She had the same dark hair, the same scar on her eyebrow from the same childhood accident. Tears streamed down her face as she watched her brother suffer, but she was also smiling. He knew, she whispered. He knew exactly what this would do. On Earth, in the military headquarters buried beneath Geneva, Fleet Commander Deho watched the broadcast with his senior staff. He was 53 years old, with gray hair and calm eyes. He had served in the Earth Defense Forces for 30 years without ever seeing real combat. When the broadcast ended, he was quiet for a long moment. His officers waited. They knew that look. It was the look of a man doing calculations. Finally, Deho spoke. Send the activation orders. Sir? One of his officers said, all fleets. All reserves. Everyone. Deho stood up from his chair. We're going to war. All. The officer hesitated. Sir, shouldn't we consider surrender? They're threatening to. They already made their mistake, Deho said. They showed us what they are. Now we show them what we are. Within hours, the orders went out. Military bases across 40 systems began activation procedures. Ships that had been in storage were powered up. Soldiers who had been doing training exercises were deployed to active duty. Entire fleets that had spent decades in peacetime suddenly had a purpose. The human response wasn't fear. It was excitement. On the colony world, New Shanghai, a young fleet captain named Min Seo received her orders. She was 28 years old and had never fired a shot in anger. She had joined the military because her family had a tradition of service, but she had always known she would probably retire without ever seeing battle. Now, she stood on the bridge of her ship, reading the activation orders, and she couldn't stop grinning. "Captain," her second officer asked, "are you all right?" "I'm perfect," Mincio said. "I'm finally perfect." "Do you understand what this means?" We're going to war?" "We're going to war." Mincio laughed. "A real war. Not a simulation. Not a drill. An actual fight." Her crew looked at each other nervously. Their captain seemed almost too happy. But across the human fleet, the reaction was the same. Soldiers were excited. Officers were energized. Even the civilians seemed eager. Military recruiting stations were flooded with volunteers. The Vectar had expected terror. They had broadcast horror to break humanity's spirit. Instead, they had woken something up. Back on the Vectar flagship, Zalmoth stood in his command center, reviewing the human response. His intelligence officers had intercepted human communications, military fleet movements, deployment orders, civilian reactions. "They're mobilizing." One officer reported. "Every human world is preparing for war." "Of course they are," Zalmoth said. "They don't understand yet. They will, when we demonstrate again." But his voice lacked confidence. Something was gnawing at him. That smile, that terrible, knowing smile. He called up Jinho's file. The human had been moved to a medical cell. His wounds were being treated. The Vectar always kept their demonstration subjects alive for a while. Sometimes they used them for multiple broadcasts. Zalmoth went to see him. Jinho was lying on a medical bed, covered in bandages. His face was bruised. His body was broken. But when Zalmoth entered the room, Jinho turned his head and smiled. That same smile. "Why are you smiling?" Zalmoth demanded. "Because," Jinho said softly, "you gave us exactly what we needed. I gave you pain. I gave you suffering." "No," Jinho said. "You gave us permission." "Permission for what?" "To do what we do best." Jinho's smile grew wider, even though it clearly hurt him. "You declared war on humanity. And we've been waiting 200 years for someone to do that." Zalmoth felt cold. "What do you mean?" "We've been bored," Jinho whispered. "So terribly bored. We've had peace for so long. Treaties with everyone. Rules. Restrictions. We've been holding back for 2 centuries. And then you came along and gave us a reason to stop holding back. You're insane." "Maybe," Jinho said. "Or maybe you just don't understand what kind of species you attacked." He closed his eyes, still smiling. "You wanted to scare us. But Commander, you have no idea how scary we are when you give us a reason to fight." Zalmoth left the room quickly. His scales were cold. His hands were shaking. For the first time in his career, Commander Zalmoth felt afraid. Commander Deho stood in the war room beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays. Each one showed a different human fleet preparing for deployment. He had spent 30 years preparing for a war he thought would never come. Now it was here. And he felt something he hadn't expected. Relief. "Sir, we have final fleet counts," his operations officer said. 43 battle groups ready for immediate deployment. Another 60 in reserve. Total strength, 800 combat vessels, plus support ships. Deho nodded slowly. "And our enemy?" "The Vectar have approximately 1,200 ships in their empire, but intelligence suggests they've never needed more than 50 for any single conquest." "Because they don't fight," Deho said. He touched one of the displays, zooming in on the Vectar territory map. 47 conquered systems, hundreds of billions of beings living under occupation, all of them terrified into submission. They've been doing this for 12 years, Deho continued. 12 years of easy victories. They've forgotten how to actually fight. His second in command, a woman named Admiral Kyung, stepped forward. She was older than Deho, with white hair tied back in a tight bun. Should we be concerned? That we've never actually fought either, sir? Deho smiled. We haven't fought. But we've been preparing to fight for 200 years. Every simulation, every exercise, every drill. We've been waiting for this. Deho smiled. Every simulation, every simulation. Every simulation. Kyung understood. The entire human military had been built around a simple fear. What if someone attacks us? For 2 centuries, humanity had expanded peacefully. They had made treaties with dozens of alien species. They had traded, cooperated, and built relationships. But they had never stopped preparing for war. We're not like them, Deho said. They use fear as a weapon. We use it as fuel. On the colony world New Shanghai, Captain Minseo was briefing her crew. Her ship, the Winter's Bite, was a destroyer-class vessel, fast, heavily armed, and crewed by 60 people who had spent years training for combat they never expected to see. Now they were 2 days from their first engagement. Listen up, Minseo said, standing in the crew briefing room. I know most of you are excited. I am too. But we need to understand what we're walking into. She pulled up a hologram of a Vectar warship. It was larger than the Winter's Bite, with heavier armor and more weapons. The Vectar have better ships than us on paper, Minseo continued. Bigger guns, thicker armor. They should be able to beat us in a straight fight. Her weapons officer, a young man named Taman, raised his hand. So, why aren't we worried? Why aren't we worried? Minseo grinned. Because they've never had to fight someone who fights back. Every battle they've won was against civilians or ships that surrendered immediately. They've never faced an enemy that wants to kill them. She changed the hologram to show tactical simulations. We've been running combat scenarios for years. Different enemies. Different situations. We've practiced fighting ships larger than ours, faster than ours, more advanced than ours. We've lost thousands of simulated battles, so we could learn from our mistakes. The Vectar have won every real battle, Taman said. Exactly, Minseo said. Which means they've never learned from failure. They've never had to adapt. They've never been desperate. She looked around the room at her crew. We're going to teach them what desperation looks like. The crew was silent for a moment. Then, someone started clapping. Then, another. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding and cheering. Minseo had to shout to be heard. All right. All right. Save that energy for the fight. Dismissed. As her crew filed out, Minseo's second officer, a woman named Unji, approached her. Captain, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why are we all so happy about this? Unji asked quietly. We're going to war. People are going to die. Maybe us. But everyone seems almost excited. Minseo thought about it. Have you ever heard of the warrior's paradox? No. It's an old human concept. A historian named Sun Wu wrote about it. She said that the most peaceful societies often produce the most dangerous warriors. Because when you don't have war, you spend all your time thinking about it, preparing for it, dreaming about it. Minseo looked out the window at the stars. Humanity has been at peace for 200 years. But we never forgot how to fight. We just forgot why we were good at it. And now we remember. Now we remember, Minseo said. The Vectar gave us something we've been missing. A clear enemy. A just cause. A reason to unleash everything we've been holding back. Unji was quiet. Then she said, That's terrifying. For them, Mincio agreed. For them, it should be. On Earth, a historian named Sun Wu was recording her observations. She was 70 years old and had spent her entire career studying human conflict. She had written 16 books about warfare, military strategy, and the psychology of combat. Now she was watching history happen in real time. This is Dr. Sun Wu. Personal log. Day 3 of the Vector crisis. She spoke into her recorder. The human response has been unprecedented. Military recruitment is up 4,000%. Civilian support is nearly universal. There have been no protests against mobilization, no calls for negotiation, no peace movements. She paused, collecting her thoughts. I've studied every human war in history. I've analyzed the patterns, the motivations, the outcomes, and I can say with certainty that what's happening now is unique. This isn't patriotic fervor. It's not revenge. It's not even really anger. She pulled up footage of Jinho's torture on her screen. She had watched it 17 times now, studying every detail. It's recognition, she continued. When the Vector tortured Jinho, they thought they were demonstrating their power. But humans saw something else. We saw an enemy that deserved no mercy, an enemy that gave us moral justification for total war. Sun Wu switched to footage of military preparations. Ships launching, soldiers training, weapons being loaded. Humanity has always had a complicated relationship with violence, she said. We're capable of tremendous cruelty, but we're also bound by ethics, laws, and social contracts. We hold ourselves back because we know how dangerous we can be. She zoomed in on a particular video. It showed a group of young soldiers, barely 20 years old, laughing and joking as they loaded missiles onto a ship. But the Vector removed our restraints, Sun Wu said. They attacked us first. They tortured an innocent man. They threatened our families. They gave us permission to be what we truly are, apex predators with a conscience that no longer needs to protect them. She ended the recording and sat back in her chair. Outside her window, she could see Earth's orbital defense platforms. They were lit up like a constellation, every weapon system active for the first time in decades. Humanity was preparing for war, and it was doing so with a terrible, eager efficiency. Back on the Vector flagship, Zalmoth was reading intelligence reports. His claws scratched against the datapad as he scrolled through information about human history. Their wars, their weapons, their tactics. This can't be right, he said to his intelligence officer. This says humans fought a war that killed 70 million of their own species. That's correct, Commander. The conflict they call World War II. Over what? What territory was worth 70 million lives? It wasn't about territory, sir. It was about ideology. About stopping an enemy they considered evil. Zalmoth kept reading. Nuclear weapons. Carpet bombing. Trench warfare. Chemical weapons. Biological weapons. Suicide tactics. Humans had invented 1,000 ways to kill each other and had used most of them at one point or another. Why didn't our scouts report this? He demanded. They did, sir. But the humans have been at peace for 200 years. We assumed they had become soft, civilized. Zalmoth pulled up video footage of human military exercises. He watched ships performing combat maneuvers that seemed almost suicidal. Pilots flying at speeds that would kill most species. Soldiers training in environments that should be lethal. They're not soft, he said quietly. They've just been waiting. Sir, they've been waiting for someone to give them a reason. He thought about Jinho's smile. About those words. You gave us permission. We didn't scare them. We excited them. The intelligence officer shifted nervously. What are your orders, Commander? Zalmoth was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, send a message to the Vector High Council. Tell them we need reinforcements. All available fleets. Sir, we've never fought humans before. Zalmoth interrupted. And I don't think we understand what that means yet. He looked at his display showing human fleet movements. Dozens of ships, maybe hundreds, all moving toward Vectar territory, with purpose and speed. They weren't coming to negotiate. They weren't coming to surrender. They were coming to fight. And from everything he had learned, humans were very, very good at fighting. For the first time in 12 years, Zalmoth wondered if the Vectar Empire had finally made a mistake they couldn't recover from. The first battle happened at the edge of Vectar territory, near a mining colony they had conquered 3 years ago. The colony's original inhabitants, a species called the Wren, had surrendered after watching a single demonstration. They had worked as slaves ever since. Captain Minceo's ship, the Winter's Bite, was part of a human strike force of 12 vessels. They jumped into the system at coordinates that should have been safe. They weren't. The Vectar had been waiting. Contacts, Yunji called from the sensor station. 20 Vectar warships. They knew we were coming. Mincio smiled. Of course they did. They're not stupid. Taman, weapons hot. Helm, evasive pattern Delta 7. The Winter's Bite rolled hard to port just as Vectar plasma bolts streaked through the space where they had been. The human fleet scattered, each ship breaking off in a different direction. It looked like chaos. It wasn't. All ships, execute razor formation, Mincio said calmly into her comm. Let's see if they studied our tactics. The human ships began moving in a pattern that seemed random but wasn't. They wove between the Vectar vessels, forcing them to turn and readjust. The Vectar ships were larger and had more firepower, but they moved like they expected the enemy to sit still. They're fighting like we're going to surrender, Taman said, laughing. They're barely even aiming. Then let's punish them for it, Mincio said. Fire at will. The Winter's Bite opened up with everything it had. Missiles. Railguns. Energy weapons. The shots were precise, targeted at the weakest points in Vectar armor. The human ships had studied every Vectar vessel design they could find. They knew where to hit. 3 Vectar ships took critical damage in the first minute. 1 exploded. The other 2 began venting atmosphere. They're regrouping, Yunji called. Let them, Mincio said. Helm, bring us around. Show them the port side. It was a dangerous move. It exposed them to enemy fire, but it also brought their heaviest weapons to bear. The Winter's Bite's main gun fired, a massive rail slug that traveled at a fraction of light speed. It punched through a Vectar cruiser's armor like paper. The Vectar fleet tried to respond. They had superior numbers, superior firepower, but they fought like they expected the humans to run. The humans didn't run. They dove in closer. They used the Vectar's own ships as cover. They moved with a coordination that came from hundreds of training exercises. Every maneuver had been practiced. Every tactic had been drilled. Another one down, Taman shouted. That's 5. Stay focused, Mincio said. But she was grinning. This felt right. This felt like what they were meant to do. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, 15 Vectar ships were destroyed or disabled. The other 5 retreated. The human fleet had lost 1 destroyer and taken damage to 3 others. But they had won. All ships, report, Mincio said. The responses came in. Casualties, damage, but also excitement. Victory. Her crews were cheering. Captain, Unji said quietly. We just killed a lot of people. We killed a lot of people who would have killed us, Mincio corrected, and who have been terrorizing innocent species for years. Remember that. But Yunji was right to be concerned. This wasn't a simulation. The debris field around them contained bodies. Real bodies. The Vectar had families. Lives. Open a channel to the retreating ships, Mincio said. Captain? Taman asked. Just do it. When the channel opened, Mincio spoke clearly. Vectar vessels. This is Captain Mincio of the Earth Defense Forces. You came here to scare us. To break us. You failed. Tell your commanders. We're not going to surrender. We're not going to negotiate. We're coming for every system you've taken. Every world you've terrorized. We're going to free them all." She paused, then added, "And if you're smart, you'll start running now." She closed the channel. Her crew was staring at her. "Was that necessary?" Unji asked. "Yes," Mincio said. "They need to understand. Fear was their weapon. Now it's ours." News of the battle spread quickly. Not just through human space, but through the Vectar Empire. The conquered species heard. The enslaved colonies heard. And they began to hope. On the mining colony below, the Wren workers watched the debris field through their facility's windows. They had seen the battle. They had watched the humans fight. One of the Wren, a female named Kess, began to cry. Not from fear, from relief. "They fought back," she whispered. Someone finally fought back. The human victories continued. Battle after battle. System after system. The Vectar had numbers, but the humans had something more important. They had trained for this. They had prepared for war while the Vectar had grown comfortable with terror. Commander Deho watched the reports from Earth. His forces were winning, but it wasn't easy. Each battle cost lives. Ships were destroyed. Soldiers died. But the momentum was on humanity's side. "Sir, we're receiving communication requests from some of the Vectar's conquered species," Admiral Kyung reported. "They want to rebel. They're asking for our support." Deho nodded. "Send them what we can spare. Weapons, advisors. Let them know that if they rise up, we'll back them." "Sir, that will stretch our forces thin. It will also stretch the Vectar thinner. They can't fight us and put down rebellions at the same time." Deho smiled. "We're not just fighting a war. We're breaking their empire." And the empire was breaking. On the Vectar homeworld, the High Council met in emergency session. Reports came in of defeats, rebellions, and retreating fleets. Systems they had held for years were falling. "This is impossible," one counselor shouted. "They're just humans. One species. One species that knows how to fight," another counselor said grimly. The High Commander stood. He was old, with scales that had turned almost white with age. "We underestimated them. We thought fear would work on them, like it worked on everyone else. What do? We adapt. Send orders to all fleets. Stop trying to terrorize the humans. Fight them properly. Kill them. And the conquered species? The rebellions?" The High Commander was quiet. "Finally," he said, "crush them. Show no mercy. If we appear weak, the entire empire will collapse." But it was too late for that. The Vectar forces were already demoralized. They had spent years conquering without resistance. Now, they were facing an enemy that not only fought back, but seemed to enjoy it. Jinho was released from the medical bay 3 weeks into the war. His body had healed, though he would carry scars for the rest of his life. When he was strong enough to walk, he was taken to a viewing room. His sister Hana was waiting for him. They hugged for a long time without speaking. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were crying. "I watched it," Hana said. "I watched what they did to you." "I know," Jinho said. "I'm sorry you had to see that. Don't apologize. You knew exactly what you were doing. You gave them a reason to fight." "I gave them permission," Jinho corrected. He looked out the window at the stars. "Humans are dangerous, Hana. We've always been dangerous. But we hold ourselves back. We make rules. We create ethics. We try to be better. Until someone gives us a reason not to be. Until someone gives us a reason to show them what we really are." Jinho smiled, though it looked painful. The Vectar thought they were the apex predators, but they've never met a species that evolved by competing with itself. Every war we fought against other humans. We learned to fight the smartest, most adaptable enemy in the galaxy, ourselves. Hana looked at him. "You're proud of what's happening." I'm proud that humanity proved we're not just another species that can be terrified into submission. I'm proud that we're freeing the people the Vectar enslaved." He paused. "But I'm not proud of the killing. I'm not proud of the destruction. I just understand that it's necessary." A human officer entered the room. "Jinho? Commander Daeho wants to speak with you." Jinho nodded. "Tell him I'll be there in a moment." When the officer left, Hana took her brother's hand. "What will you do after the war?" "Go back to flying cargo ships, probably, if they'll have me. I'm organizing a medical corps to help treat the people the Vectar hurt. The conquered species need doctors. I'm going to volunteer." "That sounds like you," Jinho said. "Always trying to fix what others break. Someone has to." They hugged again. Then Jinho went to meet with Daeho, and Hana went back to her work. The war continued. And with each battle, each victory, the message became clearer. The Vectar Empire had ruled through fear, but they had learned the hard way that fear only works on those who value survival over dignity. Humans valued both, and when forced to choose, they would fight for their dignity even if it meant risking survival. That made them more dangerous than any weapon the Vectar had ever faced. The war lasted 6 months. 6 months of battle after battle, system after system. The Vectar Empire collapsed like a house of cards, not because their military was weak, but because their entire strategy had been built on fear. Once fear stopped working, they had nothing left. The final battle happened at the Vectar homeworld. Commander Daeho led the assault personally, commanding a fleet of 200 human ships and another 100 vessels from the species the Vectar had enslaved. The freed colonies wanted revenge. Daeho couldn't blame them, but he also wanted to avoid unnecessary death. "Open a channel to the planet," he ordered. His communications officer hesitated. "Sir, they haven't accepted any of our previous offers to negotiate. Try anyway." The channel opened. On the screen, the Vectar High Commander appeared. He looked older than his years, his white scales dull and cracked. Behind him, his council stood in silence. "Commander Daeho," the High Commander said. "You've come to finish us." "I've come to end this war," Daeho corrected. "There's a difference. We will not surrender our homeworld. You don't have a choice. Your fleet is destroyed. Your conquered systems are free. You have maybe 50 warships left, and we have 200, plus another 100 from the species you terrorized." Daeho leaned forward. "This fight is over. The only question is, how many more of your people have to die before you accept that?" The High Commander was silent. Finally, he said, "What are your terms? Unconditional surrender, dissolution of the Vectar Empire. Your military will be dismantled. Your government will be restructured. You'll be under human supervision until we're certain you won't try this again. You'll make us slaves." "No," Daeho said firmly. "We'll make you citizens. Members of a galactic community. You'll have representatives. Rights. Laws that protect you. But you'll never again be allowed to terrorize other species. And if we refuse?" Daeho didn't want to answer that. But he had to be honest. "Then, we'll destroy your orbital defenses, your military installations, and anything else that could be used to wage war. We won't target civilians, but we will end your ability to fight." The High Commander looked at his council. They had no choice. They all knew it. "We surrender," he said quietly. The human fleet held position while Vectar ships powered down their weapons. It took hours. There were tense moments when it looked like some Vectar commanders might fight anyway. But in the end, they all complied. The war was over. 3 days later, Commander Xalmoth was brought before a human tribunal. He was the one who had tortured Jinho, the one who had conducted 47 demonstrations, the one who had built the Vectar's reign of terror. He expected execution. He would have executed himself in their position. But the humans surprised him. The tribunal was held on a neutral station. The judges were a mix of humans and representatives from freed colonies. Zalmoth stood in the center, his hands bound, but his head held high. Zalmoth of the Vectar Empire, the lead judge said. She was human, an older woman with gray hair. You are charged with crimes against sentient beings. Torture, murder, enslavement. How do you plead? Guilty, Zalmoth said immediately. I did everything you accuse me of. I won't deny it. The judges looked surprised. They had expected him to defend himself. Do you have anything to say before we pass sentence? The judge asked. Zalmoth thought about it. Then he said, I want to understand something. Why are you doing this? A trial. Laws. Justice. Why not just kill me? Because we're not you, the judge said. We don't rule through fear. We rule through law. Even for your enemies? Especially for our enemies. Because if we become like you, then you've won. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. We're giving you something you never gave your victims. A fair trial. After. Jen. And one. After. Zalmoth was sentenced to life in prison. Not on a Vectar world, but on a human facility designed for war criminals. He would spend the rest of his days in a cell, remembering what he had done. It was worse than death. And he knew the humans understood that. On Mars, Jinho attended a ceremony. They were dedicating a memorial to those who had died in the war. Human soldiers, civilians, even some Vectar who had tried to defect. Hana stood beside him. She had spent the last month treating injured Wren colonists. Her medical corps had grown to include doctors from a dozen species. They want you to speak, Hana said. I'm just a cargo pilot, Jinho said. You're the man who smiled. You're the one who showed humanity what the Vectar really were. Jinho looked at the gathering crowd. Thousands of people. Cameras. Media from across human space and beyond. He didn't want to do this. But he understood why it mattered. He walked to the podium. I'm not good at speeches, he started. The crowd laughed. But I want to say something about what happened. About why I smiled. He paused, collecting his thoughts. When the Vectar tortured me, they thought they were breaking humanity's spirit. They thought they were showing us that resistance was hopeless. But all they really did was show us who they were. Bullies. Cowards. People who could only win by making others afraid. The crowd was silent, listening. I smiled, because I knew something they didn't. I knew that humanity doesn't break that easily. I knew we would fight back. And I knew that once we started fighting, they would learn what real fear is. He looked directly at the nearest camera. But here's the important part. We didn't become them. We fought. We won. And then we showed mercy. We gave them trials, laws, justice. We freed their slaves and rebuilt their worlds. We proved that you can be strong without being cruel. Jinho stepped back from the podium. The crowd erupted in applause, but he barely heard it. He was thinking about the faces of the Vectar soldiers who had tortured him. He wondered if they understood yet, if they realized what they had unleashed. Captain Minseo returned to New Shanghai a hero. Her ship had survived 23 battles. She had lost 12 crew members, and each loss hurt. But the winter's bite had freed 6 colonies and destroyed 40 Vectar vessels. When she docked at the station, there were crowds waiting, cheering, celebrating. She smiled and waved, but she felt strange, disconnected. That night, she sat in a bar with her remaining crew. They drank and told stories, and tried to process what they had been through. Captain, Taman said. He was drunk, or close to it. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are we the bad guys? The table went quiet. It was the question they had all been avoiding. Why would you think that? Minseo asked carefully. Because we enjoyed it, Taman said. The fighting. The battles. We were good at it. And we liked being good at it. Doesn't that make us dangerous? Mincio thought about it for a long time. Finally, she said, "Yes, we're dangerous. Humanity is dangerous. We're good at violence, and we're good at war. But being dangerous isn't the same as being evil. How do you know the difference? Because evil enjoys causing suffering. We enjoyed stopping it." She looked around the table at her crew. Every battle we fought freed someone. Every ship we destroyed was one that wouldn't terrorize another colony. We were dangerous. But we were dangerous for the right reasons. Unji raised her glass. To being dangerous for the right reasons. They all drank to that. On Earth, Dr. Sunwoo was finishing her book about the war. She had documented everything. The battles, the strategies, the psychology. But the chapter she was writing now was the most important. The Vector War taught humanity several critical lessons, she wrote. First, that peace is maintained not by weakness, but by the capacity for violence held in check by choice. Second, that fear is only an effective weapon against those who haven't faced worse fears. And third, that the most dangerous species in the galaxy is not the one that fights without thinking, but the one that thinks deeply about when fighting is necessary. She paused, reading back what she had written. Then she added, "The Vector tried to make humanity afraid. Instead, they reminded us what we were capable of. They woke something that had been sleeping, and when it woke, it was both terrible and beautiful. Terrible in its capacity for destruction, beautiful in its restraint." Years passed. The Vector world was rebuilt under human supervision. Their government was restructured as a democracy. The freed colonies formed a new alliance, with humans as protectors but not rulers. The galaxy learned a lesson. There were species that would fight if attacked, and then there were humans who would not only fight, but would do so with a precision and enthusiasm that came from centuries of preparation. They also learned that humans, despite their capacity for violence, chose mercy when victory was assured. On the anniversary of the war's end, a monument was erected on the Vector homeworld. It was controversial. Many Vector didn't want it, but the humans insisted. It was a statue of Jinho, his face twisted in pain but smiling. Underneath was an inscription in both human and Vector languages. "Terror ends where courage smiles." Jinho himself attended the dedication. He was older now, with more gray in his hair. "I'm not a hero," he told the gathered crowd. "I was just a cargo pilot who refused to give them the fear they wanted." But that, everyone understood, was exactly what had made him dangerous. He had refused to be what the Vector expected, and in doing so, he had shown them something they had never encountered. A species that would rather die smiling than live afraid. The Vector Empire was gone. In its place was a community of species working together, protected by a humanity that had finally found its purpose. They were the guardians, the protectors, the species that would fight when necessary but would always choose peace when possible. And if anyone ever doubted humanity's resolve, they only had to look at that statue, at that smile, and remember that the most dangerous warriors are not those who love war, but those who understand when it must be fought. Their reign of terror had ended the moment a human began smiling, and the galaxy would never forget.